Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices like Stellar. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we're stargazers looking through our telescope and seeing all sorts of different celestial objects like asteroids and planets and moons. Today, we're going to be sort of building our own telescope and our notebook up in this two-player strategic game called Stellar. This is from Renegade Game Studios, 2 players only. Let me show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. The object of the game is to have the most points in the end. In the game, there's 5 different types of cards. We have planets, moons, asteroids, interstellar clouds, and black holes. Think of those as suits, if you will. Now, these cards have numerical values, and they have the amount of stars. Each of those will help you score points depending on where you play them throughout the game. Over the course of the game, you'll end up playing cards each round to your telescope so that there'll be a total of 12 cards here at the end. And below your telescope in your notebook, you'll also be playing a card there every turn, so you'll have a total of 12 cards here in the end as well. In order to make the rest of this video make sense as to what you're doing, I gotta tell you about how you score in the end. Now you can follow along with the final scoring side of your player reference. At the end of the game, essentially there's gonna be 3 main ways to score. One of them is the stars times multipliers. For each of your different types, in this case, this is the black holes, you're going to take the number of stars, so we have 2, 4, a total of 6 of those stars, and you're going to multiply that amount of stars by the amount of cards that you have in your longest consecutive run of numbers. We have a 1 here, but then we have a 4 and a 5. These 2 are consecutive. This one does us no good here in our notebook. So here we have 2 cards that's our longest consecutive for this type. So it will be 2, because there's 2 cards, times those 6 stars, so 12 points for black holes. You'll end up doing that for all of the other types. After you've scored all of those types, you'll then look at your section majorities. There's 3 parts of the telescope. The top 5 cards are the top, the 3 cards in the middle is the middle, and the 4 cards on the bottom is the bottom. In this case, this is the entire top section. In this case, you'll add up all the numbers in the top section. So we have 2, 4, 6, 9, 14. We have a total of 14. If you have more, a higher value, than your opponent in their top 5 cards, you'll get 10 points. Whoever has the most of those will get the 10 points. If you tie, you get nothing. Now you'll do that scoring for each of the 3 sections of your telescope against your opponent. Now the last way to score is a diversity bonus. Now you do this if you have at least 1 card from all 5 card types. For example, we have a black hole here, we have moon here, we have planet here, we have interstellar cloud here, and we have an asteroid here. So we have all 5. As long as we have 1 of each, we will then score the 10 points, otherwise you get nothing. Those are the 3 main ways to score. So now that you know that you're sort of trying to go for stars times your multipliers in your notebook, and majority of numbers in the 3 different sections, and possible diversity, the rest of how we actually do this will make a little bit more sense. So step 1 is to simply add one of these cards that's under one of these numbers to your hand. You simply take it and put it in your hand. Now the next step is to play a card from your hand. It could be one you already had in your hand or the one you just picked up in the previous step. Now when you play the card, it can go either in your telescope or below your telescope in your notebook. Now if you're placing in your telescope and you're placing a card type that matches one that you already have, in this case the black holes, you have to place that card adjacent to one of your other cards of that card type, meaning a card that shares an edge. So I can play this card here or here. Conversely, if I was instead playing a moon card, I could play it here, 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 or here, because all of those share edges with this card. Notice that the diagonal one does not share an edge. Now, if you're playing a card type that you don't yet have in your telescope, you can play it on any open spot, meaning a spot that has just the telescope background as in the beginning of the game. You cannot play a card where you already have a card. So let's say we decided to play a moon card right here. It shares this edge like that. Now notice this has a number 3 on it. The next step is to play a card from the row directly, and you play the card that's under the number that you just played. We just played this number 3 of moon onto our telescope. So we must play the card that's under the number 3. In this case, it's a 1 moon. Now, where you play this has to be the opposite place that you just played the card. For example, we just played in the telescope, so this card that we played has to go in our notebook. If we had decided to play in the notebook on the first part of our turn here in step 2, we would have had to have played this into our telescope. That means that each round you're playing 1 card to your telescope and 1 card to your notebook. So in this case, we just played a 3 card to our telescope, which means we're going to be playing this card to our notebook, which means we're going to place it just directly below our telescope. Now I fast forwarded just a bit to a future turn. Let's say I was playing this card into my notebook, the 3 of asteroids. Now I already have a 2 and a 4. When you play a card, you're always going to put it sort of in order from bottom to top in numerical order as close as you can. So in this case, we have 2, 3, and 4. Now remember, the largest string of consecutive numbers is going to be your multiplier times the stars in your telescope at the end of the game. Since each round you're playing 1 card into your telescope and 1 card into your notebook, there may be times where you cannot or don't want to place something into your telescope. In that case, you must play a card face down in any open spot, meaning a spot that doesn't already have a card. We'll talk about the ramifications of the scoring of these cards a little bit later. Now there's 2 special card types. One of them is a 6/0 card. Now there's only one of these special cards for each of the 5 types. Now when you play this card into your telescope, it's always a 6, which is going to help you for the majority of scoring in the different sections of your telescope. If you play it into your notebook under your telescope, it could be used as a 6, which would help chain this for a larger multiplier. Or it could be used as a 0 for the same reason in your notebook, but you don't have to decide in your notebook if this is a 0 or 6 to the end of the game. There are also satellite cards. Now these cards are not a type of card, but they count as the number that's printed here as majority for that section of the telescope. And since it's not a type, it can be played in any open spot. If you play it into your notebook, you could put it within any other type. In this case, we made it the 1 as part of the interstellar clouds type to sort of chain together our largest consecutive numbers there. Now this card you can move between different types until the end of the game. Players will continue taking turns back and forth until the end of the round where both players have completed their telescope, meaning that 11 rounds have passed and there are 12 total cards on your telescope because you started with 1 in it at the beginning of the game. Which also means you'll have 12 cards in your notebook as well. You then use this score pad to keep track of your score with the 3 main ways of scoring that I talked about in detail at the beginning of this video. Whoever has the most points is the winner. If it's tied, they share the victory. Alright, well there is Stellar. I typically like 2-player games, and I indeed like this one too. I like that you're building your own telescope. It's really cool how you start off with, the section of 12 cards that looks like someone looking into a telescope, and you're gonna be building up the things you're seeing on top of that. It just gives a cool table presence and just looks cool. I like that you're trying to balance your telescope with what you're putting in there with what you're putting in your notebook, and they're sort of like working in conjunction of each other. But there's some other things that are going on that makes this even more interesting. Because when you're putting things in your telescope, you want a lot of stars. And those stars are good because they're going to be worth points multiplied by the things that are in your notebook. But the ones that have more stars on them are lower numbers. And that's important because higher numbers are better for going for those majorities, which are huge. There's 3 different sections of your telescope. Each of those are worth 10 points. And if you don't get it, it's essentially a 20-point swing, because if you're not getting it, they're getting it. Unless, of course, you tie, then it's just a 10-point swing. But 3 different places, it's very important. So you put the higher numbers in your telescope to win the majorities, but they're not going to give you that many points when you go for the stars. So you're trying to figure out which of these types are you really going to do well in with your notebook and your stars. Maybe one you'll do really well in, maybe a second one you'll do pretty good in, but that's probably about it. So for the other ones, well, you're going to be trying to throw the large numbers out there. It has an interesting sort of push and pull, tug of war there, and those different ways of scoring that almost are at odds with each other. So I think that's a really cool way to have the scoring in this. I like that you are trying to make those, those sequential runs in your notebook. And you're trying to find out the right ones to go for. Sometimes you're using those special cards like satellites to sort of fill in there. Sometimes you're using those special cards with the 6/0 to sort of make those work. I think that's cool too. I like that you're watching what your opponent's doing. You're looking at their different sections, seeing how much total value they have, see if you're going to win the, which ones are you really fighting for the majorities for, which ones do you have a chance on, which one are you still fighting to keep. But you're also keeping track of which aspects they're really trying to do well in for their stars times multipliers. And a lot of times you're taking cards that the other player needs from the row, because at the beginning of the game turn you're drawing a card. A lot of times you're trying to draw that, and sometimes you don't even want the card. You just want to take it from them. But your hand size at the end of your turn is only 2. But that has sort of a feeling like Lost Cities, a very popular 2-player card game where you're clogging up your hand to hold cards that your opponent wants, but there's not really a good thing that you can do with it. Now with this, there are some cool things you can do with it, because even if it's a card you didn't want them to have, you're not really doing a whole lot with, well, maybe it will work for majorities. Maybe it's a higher card, right? But it does have that sort of Lost Cities feeling where you are trying to grab cards that they want that you might not necessarily want, but just to keep it from them. Like, oh, if I pull this card from them at the end of the game, that's going to take 15 points away from them that they'd be able to use if they played this, because they've set up a good multiplier there. It's not worth anything to me, but essentially it's worth 15 because it's stopping them from getting them. You'll have a lot of those thoughts in this game. I like that you're having to play a card of the row number that you just played. And this is like the crux and the twist of this game. It's very simple to understand how it works, but mind-blowing to try to figure out how to use it well. It's like, ooh, I want to play this round. Oh, but if I play this round now, then I don't have to play this card, which isn't very good. If I play this card this round, it doesn't do me that good now, but I can maybe focus on this later, but it does allow me to play this card, which I really want. And then only being able to play in one in each, the telescope and the notebook each round, really makes it different. Because it's like, oh, I could play this one here, then I could play this one here, and it's just a very cool puzzle to try to figure out. And this game is very puzzly in that regard. I also like that you're trying to figure out how to be diversified as well. Try to get those 10 points for that. This game's a very thinky game for how simple it is. I very much enjoyed it. I love 2-player games. This one is fantastic. The game might be too combative for some. If you don't like messing with other plans, if you don't like having your plans messed with, if you don't like people grabbing cards that you really need that are going to be a lot of points, this might not be the game for you. Also, the game does have that spatial element where you're planning ahead as to where am I going to put this in my telescope, because I know I can only put things around it. I need to leave spots for this. This isn't going to be a great thing, so I'll put it in the corner, stuff like that. It's not too spatial, but there is a spatial aspect. So be warned, if you don't like spatial aspects to games, take a look at this and see if this is too spatial or not for you, but it might be too spatial for some. But overall, I really enjoyed this game a ton. And like I said, for all these reasons, it's going to be staying in my collection. So let's give it a saxophone serenade to induct it into my gaming library. This has been the Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships through board games by helping you on the next one you'll love. Did you miss the Game Topper 2.0 Kickstarter? Have no fear, it's not too late to get in on the ultimate gaming accessory. Convert your table into a high-quality gaming table with a fully portable Game Topper system and take advantage of some of the best 3mm premium gaming mats in the industry. New styles, new sizes, and new accessories can be yours. Upgrade every game you play by late backing now at GameToppersLLC.com.